Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our Accelerate Series. I'm Maria Belias, Director of Programs at GWBC. I hope everyone's having a great Thursday. Today's topic, very interesting, the high stakes of financial decisions for women entrepreneurs, how to avoid the biggest financial pitfall. And I am really delighted to introduce our speaker today. She is probably one of the most dynamic women in this space, and I've really enjoyed getting to know her in the last couple of years. Her name is Meredith Moore. Meredith is a tech graduate, and she is also a writer for Forbes Finance. She's been a TED Talk speaker. She's been a part of a great organization here called Entrepreneurs Organization. And we've partnered with EO recently, thanks to Meredith, and they've got this great program that's called the Accelerator Program, I think, Meredith, where
Yep.
if you want to scale your business, if you're hovering the 250,000 to 300,000 in revenue, they can help you scale to $1 million. Incredible organization. She is on the board of the Atlanta Women's Foundation. She has done Leadership Atlanta. And also, she organizes these dinners for women called Rich Conversations, where if you want to dive a little deeper into financial conversations, whether it's about your business or about your exit plan or anything having to do with finance and money, these are the kinds of conversations that you want to be in. Go to these dinners. So anyway, Meredith is amazing. I think my favorite part about her is that she has been certified for less than 2 years. And she attended the National WeBank Conference for the first time last year at Denver. We had coffee a couple of times, and I remember she was so nervous about being certified. She said, "What do I do with the certification, Maria? How do I make this network work for me?" And look at her now. She just dove in both feet. Now she's speaking for us and at our Accelerate. She has made this network work for her, and she has been out there just getting involved and doing stuff with GWBC. And I'm so delighted to welcome her as our speaker today. So Meredith, welcome. Take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Maria. I appreciate that. So to get us kicked off, what I want to do is lay the groundwork from a sociology standpoint. Back in 2017, I doubled down in my financial advisory practice and really niched with women entrepreneurs that operate with high revenue, or we also work with a lot of senior leaders on the W-2 side that typically make over $1 million a year. So I'm used to all these issues, but I want to start with the sociology. So the first thing is balancing business with family responsibilities. I'm sure there are a lot of us here that have kids and have aging parents. And like it or not, we're in what I call a sandwich generation. We're still trying to run big girl businesses and dealing with what do we need to do with our parents, dealing with kids. I know my son, I'm living all of this myself. He's now 20 in college. We've all had to figure out that balance. And as a woman, I think it tends to affect us a little bit more in terms of caregiving. I have data on that, and it ends up costing us a lot of money in our business because of the time that we as moms want to spend and or daughters that need to spend with family. The other big sociological dynamic that I want to address that makes our situations a little different, I see a lot of times in our marriages where we're not married to an entrepreneur, and it creates power dynamic issues where we're assuming more risk and our partners may not be. And so that affects things. And we might be assuming a lot more risk with building our business and trying to scale it and the capital that's needed. And God help us if we need to make payroll and trying to use personal capital. So in our personal relationships, there's a risk tolerance difference typically. And then, I mean, I wrote paper after paper, and I'm known for this nationally. If you're out earning a spouse, like the effect that has in your household. Because the reality is there are three things that create sort of these power dynamics in relationships as it pertains to money. One is if you have higher income, if you're older, or if you have more education. And so in 2017, I interviewed literally every sociologist in the world that had any body of data academically on women breadwinners. And so that's what we found. And those are all my clients. Those are my people. And so I see this anecdotally day in, day out. And they're like, Meredith, I've got this great business. We've got some good income. We're dealing with the ups and downs, no different than me in our business. But how do I reconcile all this within my relationship? And the big joke I talked about for those of you that end up watching my TED Talk, and it was how to have better conversations with your partner around money, was I get told all the time, I know you're not my therapist, but, and the reality is when we talk more about money, there is a huge emotional component of this. And like it or not, if we're married or have a partner, like cash flow is important. So the other thing a lot of you will probably know, I know this is an old data here, but women-owned businesses in the US generate over $18 trillion dollars a year, but yet only 1 in 5 are with revenue over 1 million. And I think that number has changed recently. I know with EO in Atlanta, to be an EO member, we have to have revenues over 1 million. I know GWBC has a lot of women certified over that mark, but it's really scary that number is still so low. So we know that we have work to do there. So just laying that sociological groundwork. Love for you guys to pop in the chat. Don't know if any of these dynamics feel familiar. We just talked about a few of them. Your spouse isn't an entrepreneur. They have the save money that might be coming in. And that's created an interesting dynamic on that risk tolerance difference. Number two is breadwinning women. Are you making more money than your partner? And has that created interesting power shifts and financial stress in the relationship around that, especially around spending? I tell people I'm not the budget police. I don't care what you spend on technology, shoes, wine, whatever your jam is. But that tends to be a friction point, especially if we're out earning a spouse. And who has more power to spend and how that works as a relationship in terms of looking at your financial future. And then finally, kids and business. I know I felt this way, but guilt, where are the boundaries? What are obligations and legacy building? There might be many people here who they have family intergenerational wealth goals, and their business is the way to do that. Maria didn't go to it in my history, but I do want to share a really quick thing. So I've had my business now for 26 years. I started it right after graduating from tech. But what many people don't know is at age 30, right after having my son, I had a diagnosis of a grade 4 brain tumor, brain cancer, what's called a glioblastoma, and I'm the longest living international survivor. And I say this not to impress you, but to say that I get really clear on like goals and legacy. And most people don't get that clear on legacy building until they have financial security. They know they're not going to run out of money. But when I was facing death's door, sitting in Duke's, for those of you in North Carolina, I went to the Duke, still go to the Duke Brain Tumor Center. When I was sitting in the neuro ICU, I got very clear on what I was trying to do with my son. And again, he's at Auburn. He's actually really proud, another proud mom here. We'll be studying in Milan this summer through Auburn's business program. And I think a lot about legacy, not just financially, but what we're teaching our kids. And actually a lot of these things that we're going to be talking about today. So here's some data that I just referenced. Women entrepreneurs are more likely to provide unpaid elder care while running a business. You might have an aging parent and somebody needs to run home, make sure mom is okay. Long-term care costs, and by the way, this is kind, can exceed $100K a year. I have a number of clients where we have to build into cash flow, helping our parent. They might not have saved the amount of money that you have. They didn't have the businesses. They didn't have a large business exit. And the onus is on us to make sure we have the cash flow. We build that into our business and our financial plan so we can help support them in any cost of care. This will speak to eventually, it's going to be really critical owning long-term care insurance and even considering that buying it on your parents if you're ultimately going to pay for it anyway. We have a client right now in memory care, and we're literally spending $22,000 a month. So again, it creates an asset protection play. By the way, those of you who own the businesses, long-term care insurance is deductible through the business. So it's an asset protection strategy. But as women and caregivers, just be aware of that on your parents. Also, the financial cost of caregiving can erode both the business and your retirement savings. So it's what impact with you having to run away from your business and have your number two and your staff running things where you, as the key leader and the visionary, can't be there while you're handling family matters. Some of these are numbers, again, that you all know, but we know that there's some financial inequality with women entrepreneurs and capital. This quote I hear quoted all the time, or this stat is women receive less than 2% of venture capital funding. And we're bootstrapping businesses much longer than men are. So I lay out some 3 funding options, and we all know the landscape has changed right now. If any group knows, it's the GWBC crowd. So I put on here grants. Some of that may have dried up given what we're going through. Second is revenue-based financing. I see this. I have several friends who own $5 and $10 million companies, and they are literally using this technique to drive revenue. For example, I've got a staffing company, and she is a key person that literally is bringing them cases and new clients for a new client acquisition and splitting the deal. Instead of giving him equity, she's able to give him a percentage of those revenues. And so, as a brainstorming technique or additional ways that I can get client acquisition and additional revenue, that's one way to do it. And then I think a lot of us know about crowdfunding. But bottom line, we know at a high level, women entrepreneurs and acquiring capital is more difficult. Money talk. Talked a lot about this in my TED Talk. Getting comfortable with wealth. My whole goal is to normalize talking about money. It's uncomfortable. People avoid it, and they have a lot of shame around it. That's just the reality. So here's some ideas. Women often feel pressure to justify financial success. We shouldn't have to apologize for anything. There are a lot of badass women in this call, and my recommendation is own it. Be able to talk to friends about it. I mean, obviously, we have to have the right groups where we just arbitrarily start talking about money. And we see a lot of people avoiding those financial conversations leads to missed opportunities. And that's one thing I know Maria mentioned in my bio. So I host this dinner series called Rich Conversations. It's not just about money. We dig into all sorts of intimate things around our businesses and issues we're facing. But I do that dinner series because I want an open forum to where it's a private forum, but we can talk about not just money, but all the issues in our business. So I'm going to challenge each of you. Who are you surrounding yourself with that has achieved even more success than you have, that is pushing you on some of these issues? I'm so deliberate about my network and how I built it because I know there's a saying that you're the average of the 5 people you're around the most. I don't want to be around the 5 people that have the same revenue in my business. I want to be around 5 people that have already done it, wrote the book, and are better than I am in that respect. So normalize money, and normalize money, by the way, in your own household. I started trading a portfolio with my son at age 10, not because I needed him to understand the nuances of the stock market, but because I wanted it. Think of it like swimming. I was a collegiate swimmer before I went to Georgia Tech. I went to Rice University and I swam D1 for them. But if people aren't comfortable in the pool, they're never going to be comfortable in the pool. So I threw them in head first, just like I did with money. At 10, he was working with me on the portfolio. And now I didn't ask him to do it, but he's majoring in finance at Auburn. He's very comfortable talking about money. And so, how can we make our kids and ourselves more comfortable and not avoiding it, normalizing it? We need money to do anything that we do, whether it's revenue to run our business, whether we're paying a vendor, or God help us having to make a tax payment. We need to understand money and be comfortable with it. So here are some of the top financial pitfalls that I consistently see with scaling women entrepreneurs. First is blurring personal and business wealth. Second is underestimating tax planning. We're going to talk a lot about this because we just had some tax deadlines. Ignoring business succession, and for that matter, estate planning. So right down here, neglecting retirement. And you're going to hear from me, and I'm known for this. I hate the word retirement. Clearly, it's on my deck. I like to use the term work optional. We're working or running our businesses because we want to, not because we have to. So work optional is your new term for the day. Neglecting retirement or work optional and estate planning. Just because we don't want to think about getting hit by the proverbial bus doesn't mean people don't die every day. So let's talk first about keeping our business and personal finances separate. So pay yourself properly. There's two components in paying yourself out of your business. And many of you may know this, so apologies if this feels like first grade. You have an officer salary, and that's what you're putting yourself on payroll for. We know the IRS mandates that we pay ourselves a reasonable salary. And then we take distributions, which those are the profits or the K1 that you might see out of your LLC or your S Corp or whatever your entity may be. Structuring the business legally and tax efficiently. So again, whether you're a single member LLC or whether even you're a C Corp, having that structure correct is efficient for a couple reasons. Number one, it affects taxation. It affects the partners you can bring in. And there's some other legal implications from a succession planning standpoint. So really looking at that structure is key for your business, and even re-looking at every 3 to 4 years to make sure that you're still the most efficient and effective and business entity that you need to be based upon what you're doing. And so over time, I think for many of us, we want to build what I call financial independence or financial security. And what that means is if I ran 1,000 scenario tests tomorrow outside of your business, this is you personally, if you just stopped making income today at all, like there was no income coming in, you don't need to work for the rest of your life. So you have that financial independence. And if, again, you have work optional, you can work if you want to, but not because you have to. And so most people I see have no idea what this number is. And as we talk about business exits, most people that I know have already gone through large business exits had no idea what that number was. And I would tell you that for many of you, this may be a goal and it may seem really far away right now. But at some point, you're going to want to know how much you need to say that is independence. And $1 million ain't going to cut it. It's going to have to be a much bigger number because for your notes, if you have $1 million, let's say you won the lottery and got $1 million safely, you could only pull off $40,000 for $1 million for the rest of your life without running out of money. Most of you do not live off of $40,000 a year. I know I definitely do not. And so knowing that magic number for financial independence is going to be eventually important. So here are a couple of key things. We talked about what does your officer salary need to be? And by the way, this is the number from a tax planning standpoint that will also dictate how much you put into a retirement plan. Retirement plans for entrepreneurs, me included, is not about retirement. It's a tax play. It's a way to get pre-tax dollars set aside. And that amount that goes into that salary also tells us what that number needs to be. Having an emergency fund. We know we need operating capital in our operating account for a business, but personally, I want you to view you and your business as two completely separate entities. In your personal emergency fund, you need 3 to 6 months of living expenses in cash. You needed a new roof, something bad, unexpected happened. Your business operating account is not a piggy bank, and we can't go to that. And so bifurcating you personally versus the business is going to be critical. So that emergency fund, I would love to see you guys with that 3 to 6 months of living expenses. And for every financial planning engagement we do with any entrepreneur or W-2, the hardest homework item we get for folks is having them get us their living expenses. Again, not the budget police, but if you don't know what your personal monthly spend is, how can you determine how much money you need to reach financial independence? We don't know what it costs to run your household. That's the second homework item. Build your emergency fund, set it up in a separate account, and start to figure out what it takes to run your household. And I want you to see your business as like the golden goose. Okay. That is going to lay all the eggs. The goose is what we want to protect, but we do want to take some of those golden eggs and create other assets outside the business. So God forbid something happened with the business, we have assets outside. So creating some personal investment to adjust for that as well. We've got the business, and then we have you personally and your family. Okay, this is my favorite, especially as of late. And a lot of people don't know the right terminology. So most of you should have some sort of CPA and or bookkeeper. And my experience is most people are doing they're doing tax prep. They're having somebody that does the tax return. Okay. And it's reactive. But the secret term, if you will, because nobody knows what it is, to be doing tax planning. So instead of being reactive, hey, here's all my stuff, pushing it off to your CPA, that's going to lead to deadline problems, missed deductions, and people having to be reactive. And so by being proactive, what are we doing throughout the year? What's the cadence of meetings with your financial advisor and your accounting professional? So we're proactively forecasting where revenues are going to be. Many of us have been affected by what's going on federally right now with contracts. And so revenues might be down, and we need to know from an estimated tax strategy, maybe we don't need to be sending as much to the IRS. God knows they're losing staff left and right. So what are we doing proactively throughout the year? And then what's that cadence of meetings and who's on your team to be able to do that? So that might include things like retirement plan contributions, staffs or donor advised funds. For those of you that might have certain charities that you like, there's some tax advantages. I'm going to let the Q&A tell me if I need to dig in more there. And there might be some certain expenses that we want to make sure that we're taking advantage of, but not waiting to the last minute. And a lot of this is going to depend on your team and who you're working with and how that's being managed. We talked about your business is the goose. It's the golden goose. So that's your big asset. So how do we think about planning accordingly? I'm going to go down this road and I'm going to do it unapologetically since I've done this for 26 years. And I've had 10 clients die in the past 2 years. Like in my whole career, I've had 12, 10 have died in the past 2 years. So I've seen all my Meredith lecture number 102 play out real time in the past 2 years. Key person risk is really key. So let's say you did get hit by the proverbial bus. What impact does that have? Have you personally guaranteed any of the debt? You might tell me that, hey, Mayor, I have like massive payroll. I have a number two. They would run the business without me right now. I'm going to push back and say, well, why the heck are you still working then? You're in the business. You might have the client relationships, your key vendor relationships. So there is a value of you being there. And so a lot of times we look at key person life insurance, and that's key, no different than if you went to business that made widget. The machine that makes the widget is of value. You are the senior leader. You are the visionary. You bring value to that business. And so looking at how do we think about key person risk Again, that's a lot of what we do in our engagements, but this is a very key issue. For those of you that don't want to stay in this business for the rest of your life to age 100, no matter what, it's critical to have clean financials for evaluation. I'll be speaking. I'm bringing Maria kindly and Roz. I'm bringing a panel with a valuation appraiser person in September. But clean financials are critical to be able to know what the value of your business is at any point in time. And I know, again, back to engagements that we do, we're always looking at what it's worth now and what are the levers in tax planning and looking at our financials that are going to drive the value of that business up. What are the key things that you and your CFO can brainstorm on that will increase value? And this is the biggest complaint I hear from every other professional in my space, since we do a lot of exit planning, is entrepreneurs. And again, I'm one of them. And again, I'm certified. We wait too long. And so when to start this, whether it's, hey, Meredith, I want to sell this to my employees, I want to pass it to my kids, or I just want a third-party buyer and I want to get as much money as possible, peace out, move to work optional. That may be the plan too. But you really want to begin, and don't laugh at me and tell me I'm crazy, because I know you're busy. I assure you that I'm busy too. 3 to 5 years, 3 to 5 years. And so really starting to secure the right team, and we'll talk about the right team and trusted advisors around you is going to be key. So retirement isn't just for employees. So this is a tax play. Doesn't mean we're going to retire at 60 necessarily and go sit on the rocking chair and nothing else is going to happen. But the types of retirement plans for businesses vary across the board. And there's so many rules around your officer salary, what the salary and the ages are of your employees. And so for those of you that own really nice lifestyle businesses without a lot of employees, using what we call a solo 401k or SEP IRA might make all the sense in the world. And that's why you should have your advisor that knows all the tax laws as to figure out what's best. A lot of times 401k profit sharing, you can get up to $70,000 pre-tax as the owner. Cash balance plan, pension plan. So there's a whole host of them. And everything is going to be based on the financials and the payroll and your officer salary in order to figure out what's best. So the other thing is the holy grail is going to be tax-free money. Okay. And so many of you have heard of Roth IRAs. So that money grows tax-free. More importantly, for your notes, you are not forced to take the money out and pay the taxes like we are with all pre-tax IRA, pre-tax 401ks. And so the reason that's important is you may still have good income 20 years from 30 years from now because of the business. And you might not want to have to take money out and pay taxes from a retirement plan. So really looking at, do I put money in for tax savings now with where my business is, knowing that I may be in a higher tax bracket later, is a really critical thing to know. And back to the thing I'm going to keep beating the dead horse over is diversify your assets beyond the business. The business is the golden goose. Use the eggs to create other assets for balance sheet diversification. And the biggest headwind that we're dealing right now is a long-term care healthcare need. The reality is, I literally just mentioned I had a bunch of clients that have died over the past 2 years. I just had a 93-year-old die. Because I've been doing this so long, my client base has aged up. And the reality is, when we're doing scenario testing, we plan as if everybody lives to 100. Now, that being said, you're going to pontificate to me about your family tree and how old grandma was and how old dad was when they died. But financial technology is in a place that it never was. Back to my story, for those of you that popped in later, I had brain cancer. I had what Ted Kennedy and John McCain had. I'm the longest living survivor of a glioblastoma. Again, thank you to the folks in Raleigh-Durham over at Duke's Brain Tumor Center. I shouldn't be here. I'll hit 20 years June 1, and that's because of healthcare technology and Duke University. The reality is we need a plan. All of us need a plan as if we and our parents are going to live to 100, and we can't outlive our capital, and we can't outlive this income. So how do we position our balance sheets, our cash flow statements, our rental properties, our businesses to where they are self-sustaining? That is going to be where we want to go, but making sure we have all the asset protection in place to cover this if it's going to cost $14, $15, $20,000 a month, like what I'm experienced with clients on claim with me in memory care. Okay, so we've hit on a lot of stuff. Meredith's gotten a little pedantic on you, but that's okay. So how do we assemble basically your dream team on thinking about exit, thinking about all your financials? The key people are going to be CPA, financial planner, business attorney, and or trust and estate attorney. And somebody, one of those people maybe fall in this area, but knows about exit. So from a strategy standpoint, exit strategist. And working with professionals who understand your industry and your business. So really looking at folks that own massive real estate, the financials there are going to look very different than if you're selling consumer goods. And also for those of us that have government or corporate contract, like really understanding that specificity. I would argue that having that financial quarterback and overseeing all those people is the way to do it. And that way you're paying one fee and then they're collaborating and bringing you in. So that's where I operate almost like the money Sherpa, if you will, because these are so many projects to plan and you're running your business. You don't have time. God knows none of us want to pay legal fees, but by having that quarterback, looking at the big picture and then bringing people in as needed, that's what I find to be the most efficient way to run it. So let's talk about estate planning. We could spend a long time here if we wanted to. I see a lot of gaps here. And again, we're all busy running our businesses, family, all the social dynamics I talked about in the beginning. We all know that we need a will, but I can also assure you right here, a will is a ticket to go to probate court. And what does it mean to go to probate court if you died? All your creditors get the first stab at your estate. Okay. All the funky family members, cousin Eddie that said that Meredith owed him $80,000 can now dispute things. You want to avoid probate for you personally, your family, and your business, because all your business creditors can come after the estate too. The way to avoid probate is through what we call a revocable living trust. A revocable trust is the same thing as a will, but there's no probate. Another thing that many people don't understand, and by the way, I teach continuing legal education to attorneys all over the country, and most of them don't know this either unless they're in trust and estates. Your beneficiary designation supersede whatever fancy schmancy documents you have. So if you want a quick way right now to look at your estate plan, audit your beneficiaries, and the three things that have beneficiary designations are going to be life insurance, retirement accounts, and annuity contracts for those of you that may have them. So beneficiary coordination with the documents is ultimately critical. And for those of you, all us here at businesses, that operating agreement is sacred. And when we do a lot of document review, it's like we find that a lot of things are missing. What's going to happen to the business if you got hit by the proverbial bus? If you're like, well, my number two is going to have it, so how are they going to pay your family for it? Do they have a lot of cash on the sidelines? If you were the one that is personally guaranteed a lot of the business with the bank, how is that going to work? So again, throughout all the scare things, but my experience has been the estate plan is very rarely locked down. They may think they have it done, but there's the documents you have, the documents you think you have, and the documents you want. And the same thing is true for your operating agreement in your business. On the HR side, what are you doing now to train your successors early? If you're wanting to sell to a third party, we got to make sure that our number two and our staff is like ready to go, like where this is repeatable if you weren't the person running it. And so by having a strong personal estate plan and a business continuity plan, that's going to equal legacy, whether that's to you personally with a large payout or whether that's to your family or your team, depending on how you might want to exit. And so I've laid out here sort of a phase of beginning to look at exit and start early. Even if you just start, you're 5 years into this business, start thinking about it. We want to think with the end in mind and then work backwards. So what I would tell you is phase one, like 3 to 5 years out, foundation and future vision. Again, how do you want to exit? What's the magic number that you need to have financial security or financial independence? Phase two is business optimization. How do we get our staff, our core processes systematized? How do we start preparing our people? And then phase three is the structuring. Literally, that's 1 to 2 years out. What legal agreements, are we going to need to put into place to address all of this? How do we start having the right team early on to be able to work these different steps? Phase four is that deal execution, and that's 6 to 18 months out. This isn't like, hey, I want to sell my business and we're going to do it in 6 months. Attorneys hate that. So do CPAs. I'm not a fan of it, but it happens. And then phase five is post-exit transition. You might not know it, or maybe you do, if you're a little bit like me. So much of our identity is tied to who we are with our business. And I have seen so many times people will sell a business. I had a friend of mine actually here in Atlanta. She had a $28 million exit she's 26. So she has little kids. And again, that sounds like miracle, but the reality is like, she doesn't know what's next. She's got little kids, so she's still in the mid of everything. And so how does she even think about money? Does she buy more businesses? So the cycle, you might be like, hey, well, that's a good problem to have. Yes, but psychologically, she doesn't know. And so really thinking about your identity and what's next post-exit is a very real thing. And that's why I bring this up. Couple things, building financial literacy at home. We talked about that with our kids, making money discussions normal. How, with building our estate plan, how can we start creating structured gifts? Meaning it doesn't have to be, I suspect that nobody here is like truly wealthy, but it might be basic, like, hey, I'm going to give you this money. Now I want you to have an experience and invest it. I give my son a $500 a month allowance at Auburn for 2 reasons. And I've told him this multiple times. We talk about this all the time. A, he needs money to spend. He is a VIP at Chipotle in Auburn, Alabama. But I want him to have a relationship with money and spending so that if he runs out, he's not coming back to mom for more money. Like he's got a FITFO. It's figure the F out. I'll let you figure that one out. FITFO. Second thing are trust. The advantage of trust built within your will or revocable living trust is most of us don't want to enable our kids. So getting large lump sums from life insurance or otherwise is not something we want to do. We might want to parse that money out or say, hey, if you get a graduate degree, this amount comes out. I take one perspective and I want to explain both sides of this coin. My son went to Woodward Academy here in Atlanta, loved that school, everything about it, but we paid for that. And so he needs to figure things out himself. And so I've left about $3 million in life insurance and a trust for him. He does not get any of that lump sum. He literally gets 4% of that principal a year. And that is a more conservative, let's say, use that term, way of thinking about it. Some people will leave money outright to their kids and a spouse. And what that means in English is like, hey, here's the money, peace out. The problem with that is if you're leaving all your money outright to a kid or your spouse, as many of us do via beneficiary, if they get sued, let's say they still have the business and they sue your spouse after you're dead, they're on the hook for that money. So creditors, predators, and let's say your spouse gets remarried, ladies, they can take the money that you left them outright and shift it to a joint account with the new spouse. So we want to create asset protection using trust within estate planning as well, with how we leave the money. So estate planning is a values-based. It is not checking a box, getting a will, which is how most people view it, no matter how sophisticated they are. And then again, family giving. Use for your teens, there's an investing app. I have a tool called Parents Resource Guide to Kids and Money that lays out games and books that are age-based. You can put in the chat if that's something you're interested in. Create an allowance framework. Just like I did with Eric, create a framework to where they can begin to have a relationship with money. Beyond wealth, creating a legacy. Again, what do you want your money to mean? Again, right now we may feel like we're broke, but if something happened to you, if you think about all your life insurance, all the money you've saved in retirement, what your business could be worth, define your why. And then align the business and the estate plan with those particular goals. What I want to do now is we'll do Q&A, but I'm going to leave this up. So again, fellow woman certified business, dealing with a lot of the same trials and tribulations that many of you are. I built a financial power playbook. So feel free to grab that QR code to get that. And again, as a GWBC sister, doing 20-minute calls with whoever wants it just for free. So feel free if you want to grab that too. But I'm going to jump into the chat really quick. And I don't know if I can do that
I think I'm
without.
gonna say, I see like a compound question. It looks like Meredith,
Sure.
where it's being asked, how do you find these power women? And will these groups of women let you in if you're not in their income bracket?
Thank you for that, Sade. So there is a socioeconomic, because we want to learn from each other. That was one reason I had joined EO, was I wanted to be around other people at that revenue level. It is weird. Like you want to be around that same point. Like it's hard to jump up, but you can jump up infinitesimally. For example, if you have 250 of revenue, it's not a big deal to create your own mastermind with somebody that has $500,000 of revenue. When you hit $1 million, it's not weird to hang out with somebody that does $5 million of revenue. And by the way, I'm here to tell you, like somebody can have $5 million of revenue, but have 100,000 of profit. That's the problem I have when we're working with entrepreneurs. My $10 million revenue clients might be way more broke than my $1 million clients. So you got to the question point, you are dead on. It's also about profit, and it's going to be about who you align with from a personal standpoint, and creating your own networks and creating your own masterminds. And I'm known for being a connector here in Atlanta. And that's how I've done it, is again, always trying to push myself to the next level. That was one reason I joined EO. Once I hit $1 million, I joined EO. And now I'm friends with people that have $100 million companies, $500 million companies. But it's creating that group. So it can be done. It's got to be organic. And that's how I do my dinner series. And we don't just talk about money. Again, we talk about everything. People problems, personal issues. By the way, we're all dealing with the same stuff. It's just nuanced. So can you give me the next question, please?
Yeah, sure. Scrolling down, seeing what are some examples of personal investments?
Yeah, so a couple different things. First of all, will be retirement accounts. Second would be an after-tax investment account where you're using marketable securities, stocks, mutual funds, bonds. Again, that's a whole separate talk, and I can give how to think about that. But another good example might be a personal CD, a college 529 account, which grows tax-free for those of you that have upcoming graduates at some point in time. Cash value life insurance has equity. I know I've used that to finance payroll a few times, but creating a number of different personal kinds of accounts that are taxed differently and have different kinds of risk. we have so much risk in our business that I'm always very cognizant with our clients on how we take risk outside the business.
I'm going to chime in. There's a
Please.
question in the chat.
Great.
How do you find these power women? And I want to banter with you a little bit about this, Meredith, because we're about to do an Accelerate
Yep.
that is around civic engagement and how civic engagement leads to business.
Yep.
And that answers this question. How do you find power women and women volunteer? Women get involved in the community.
Yep.
And I read earlier to you all a little bit about Meredith's civic engagement involvement. And that is exactly how you find power women. At least that's how it works in Atlanta. And if you ever read my resume, you will see my long list of civic engagement. But civic engagement is a great way to find the power women. You want to talk a little bit about how that has worked for Meredith?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And again, I'm known in my space for being a connector. I think the first thing that was the first big mover was being able to be a part of Leadership Atlanta. And that's not an easy feat. I have several major CEO friends that you all would know their name that took 6 times to get in. And it's a little formulaic with how to build your application for that, but that got me a ticket to the show, so to speak. And I've literally, to your point, I sit on the board for EO. This is my 2nd year, and I'm on the board for the Atlanta Women's Foundation. The way Atlanta works, there's about 6 major boards. And figuring out who I need to meet, and your job is to make friends. Like literally, I spent a lot of money on consulting and coaches, I have over the years, and I'm a firm believer that I get a lot of ROI on that for myself. I've just made influential friends. And like, it's not a big deal. And anytime they need help, I help them, but can also call them. I'm in something not on there called International Women's Forum. You have to be asked to join. And it's the most badass group of women. And growing up here, like literally Rosalind Carter and Coretta Scott King started. And so anytime I hang out with that group, because I grew up here in Atlanta, I was born here. These are my idols. In fact, I just had lunch with seriously somebody I've looked up to for 15 years. I had lunch with her last week. And I told her that. I'm like, I've been waiting for this lunch for 15 years. And so now we're all going, she and her partner, me and my partner, going out for dinner. It's all about building those relationships and people that you align with and just making friends, because they'll have ideas and they want to help you.
Right. So digging deeper into that,
Yep.
I also did Leadership Atlanta in 2006. And then I became the executive director of Leadership DeKalb from 2013 to 2020. And I had a cohort of the top 3% of DeKalb County, which were about 55 to 60 people every single year. So I cultivated leaders for those many years. So over 500 people. That grew my network in unbelievable ways. But serving on boards, trying to get into these leadership programs, and there are leadership programs in Charlotte and in South Carolina.
Oh, yeah.
In North Carolina, there's Leadership Charlotte. I know that for a fact. There's Leadership Greenville. There are leadership programs in every one of the states in our region. And in addition to that, there are very notable nonprofit boards in all of the states that we have a footprint for GWBC. So it's a win-win. One, you're serving and helping your community, but believe it or not, you're developing partnerships and relationships with people on those boards. And at the end of the day, in the nonprofit world, what we like to say in fundraising really is that people give to people. And it's really the same thing in business. People like to do business with people. We really do a lot with capability statements, right? The capability statements in our world is helpful when we are filling out what's in the database in WeBank Link 2.0, because when we do the search for the database, it's really important for those keywords. It's important for when we're pulling the list. But at the end of the day, people do business with people. People do business with who they trust. And so the more you can create interactive experiences with people and serve on boards and create connectivity, the better. And I know that when I had my consulting business, I was able to grow my business in a very short amount of time simply by just being out there. And so I would encourage you, we'll talk more about this when we do the Accelerate program. I can't remember when that will be. I think it's in June that we're going to do the civic engagement program for Accelerate. So make sure you sign up for that. Well, thank you all. And so Meredith's contact information is right here. You know how to find her. If something comes up for you later on and you want to ask her any questions, this is how you can track her down. Meredith, thank you for sharing what you shared today. And I really appreciate how you went into some of the psychology behind thinking through money, because I've read enough books around this. It's really emotional in many ways. I know it is for me, and I appreciate you going into that. Have a great rest of the day, everyone, and we will see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.